Ash drifted like snow across the charred remains of Sigma-9's eastern ridge. The scorched soil reeked of plasma and scorched alloy, and above it all, the crimson sky burned with the dying embers of orbital wreckage. From the cracked hull of a shattered Terran comms tower, a single human hand dragged itself through soot and steel. Sergeant Kael Voss gasped as pain jolted through his ribcage. Every breath was a negotiation with agony, but he clenched his teeth and pulled himself deeper into the ruin. The left side of his body was slick with dried blood. His armor, standard-issue Terran Recon suit, was split open at the thigh and shoulder, exposing torn muscle and broken tech. He had no comms, no medevac beacon, no squad. And yet, he was not dead. That fact alone was a mistake the Empire would regret. 3 days earlier, Kael had been part of a sniper recon team embedded beyond enemy lines to delay the Galactic Empire's supply operations. They were ghosts by doctrine, strike silently, vanish, repeat. No trace, no witnesses. But when a fleet of enemy dropships descended faster than command predicted, everything went sideways. Kael remembered the whine of the aerial bombardment, the metallic shriek of his spotter being torn in half, and the fireball that engulfed the ridge. After that, just pain and silence. He had awoken buried under half a ton of ferrocrete, ribs cracked, leg torn, helmet shattered. The biosuit had done what it could, sealed the wounds, dosed him with coagulants, but the damage was deep. He should have died there, anonymously, like so many others. But Kael had always been difficult to kill. Dragging himself into what remained of the comms tower, he located his rifle. It lay across 2 broken beams, its barrel warped but intact. With effort, he cradled it against his chest. The weapon was old, modified far beyond spec, a relic from Earth's last orbital war. Kael had named it Echo, after his first kill shot. It was his voice in a galaxy that wanted him silent. Above him, distant engines hummed. Empire scout ships hovered in slow patrol arcs. They knew Sigma-9 was secure. The Terran offensive had failed. The Empire had crushed the resistance and was now sweeping up stragglers. Kael had heard them on the open frequencies: laughter, derision, victory. They assumed any survivors weren't worth the energy to finish off. He wasn't a survivor. He was a sniper. And he was still operational. With trembling fingers, he pulled open the last compartment of his belt and extracted a half-charged stim injector. He jammed it into his neck. The surge hit fast, his heartbeat steadied, his vision sharpened, and the veil of pain lifted just enough to let him sit upright. His mind began to work. 6 rounds. 1 stim. A cracked lens in his visor. No food left. Water, barely. No comlink. No extraction window. The odds were terminal. But then again, odds had never mattered to Kael. What mattered was the Empire had left him breathing. They'd landed their brass nearby. He'd seen it on the Recon drone before it died. General Alvex himself had touched down with a full security detachment, eager to inspect the shattered remains of the Terran base they had just conquered. Kael had watched it happen through one functional lens, rage simmering with every second. They paraded through the rubble as if nothing could touch them. They hadn't seen him. That was their era. His body protested as he crawled up to the highest intact floor of the tower. From here, he had a partial view of the valley below. A charred flag still clung to one of the barricades, Terran blue, slashed and burned. Beyond it, the Empire's mobile command unit loomed like a metal insect, black and gold, crawling with guards and drones. Kael recognized Alvex immediately, the signature high-color armor, the silver-crowned helm, the arrogant gait. The man had once ordered the vaporization of an entire Terran mining colony simply because it dared to resist taxation. Kael steadied his breath. A fresh wave of pain blurred his vision, but he fought it down. The lens crack distorted the reticle, but not enough to stop him. His hands still remembered the rhythm. His muscles still knew the aim. And somewhere inside him, a voice, quiet and cold, began to whisper numbers. Wind speed, elevation, distance, pressure, all of it calculated behind bloodshot eyes and a fractured skull. He looked through the scope. It wasn't a mission anymore. There was no briefing, no exit strategy, no backup. This wasn't about duty. This was about balance. Kael centered the crosshairs on the general's chest. Then he paused. Too obvious. Too quick. Not enough damage. Not enough fear. He shifted the barrel, scanned the encampment. Saw the engineers. The tactical operators. The specialists. The power nodes. The fuel lines. Each one a weak point. Each one a potential message. His lips curled into something like a smile. They had left him to die in the dirt. But Kael Voss wasn't done. He was just beginning. And the Empire was about to learn what happened when it ignored a wounded human. Darkness clung to the ruins like a second skin. Kael crouched beneath the broken girders of a fallen gantry, sweat beading beneath his fractured visor. His breath came in slow, measured intervals, each exhale ghosting against the inside of his helmet. The stim had begun to fade, replaced by the raw pulse of pain in his leg and side. But the clarity it had given him remained. He had found the pattern. The Empire's elite followed protocol, even in the aftermath of victory. Patrols moved in predictable loops. Drones scanned by quadrant. Every 4 hours, a convoy resupplied the forward outpost, now a grotesque patchwork of Terran steel and Imperial banners. Kael memorized their rhythms not out of duty, but out of obsession. He needed the routine, because precision was all he had left. A day had passed since he watched General Alvex strut across the ash-coated tarmac. The man was still here, likely confident the planet had submitted to order. Kael didn't blame him. Why worry about one forgotten corpse in a pile of thousands? Still, he waited. He didn't fire. Not yet. He used the time to prepare, dragging what he could salvage into a makeshift nest within the skeletal remains of a relay station 2 clicks north of the command unit. From there, he had an elevated line of sight on the compound's courtyard. Perfect range. Minimal exposure. Sniper heaven. With a knife and broken tools, he pried apart the last power cell from a scorched drone and wired it into his scope. The recharge was weak, but enough. The cracked lens remained, but now the targeting system hummed to life. Green flickers danced across the dust-choked glass. Kael reviewed the shot again. Alvex emerged daily at roughly the same time, always surrounded by his retinue, always within a narrow radius of the landing pad. Kael ran wind calculations. He tested his breathing, squeezing the trigger against an empty mag to train muscle memory. The numbers worked. His body, however, was failing. He barely slept. The pain had become a constant throb in his skull, a heartbeat in his thigh. Fever licked his spine. His skin burned beneath the armor. Infection was setting in, but he didn't care. He had enough time for one thing. That was all he needed. By the second night, the plan had sharpened into something ritualistic. Kael moved like a machine. He crawled through debris fields under the cover of electromagnetic interference to plant improvised traps, shards of carbon steel tied to vibration sensors near the fuel depot, a cracked thermal grenade wired to a leaking coolant pipe. They weren't meant to kill. Just distract. Misdirect. The kill shot belonged to Alvex. On the third morning, as Sigma-9's twin suns pushed through the clouds, Kael took his position. His heartbeat slowed. His mind entered the familiar quiet. He spotted the general before the retinue appeared, a glint of silver above a cape of indigo and crimson. The bastard moved with the smug assurance of a man who thought himself untouchable. He walked slowly, talking with a subordinate Kael didn't recognize. Their path was routine, and Kael's scope followed with absolute calm. He adjusted elevation, 1.9 kilometers. Factored in planetary rotation, 0.07 shift. Atmospheric interference minimal. Wind drifting east. He inhaled. Alvex turned, laughing. Kael exhaled. The rifle bucked once. The shot took just under 3 seconds. It pierced the general's neck just below the armor line, exiting through the skull with surgical precision. The head snapped back as blood misted across the tarmac. Silence hung for a second, as if even the Empire couldn't comprehend what had happened. Then chaos erupted. Kael pulled back immediately, crawling from the nest before drones could triangulate. Screams echoed across the compound. Sirens followed. Troopers shouted over open channels, conflicting commands crackling through Kael's comms receiver. He smiled. Not from satisfaction, but from certainty. They knew now. Not who. Not where. But what? A ghost. A remnant. A sniper they should have buried deeper. He reached the lower tunnels before the first aerial sweep hit. Heat signatures crawled across the ruins, scanning every crevice. He stayed low, hidden beneath a collapsed archway laced with Terran signal disruptors. His traps had begun triggering, explosions in the west courtyard, fire along the coolant lines. Distraction. Noise. More confusion. The Empire responded as expected, with overwhelming force and no clear direction. Kael limped deeper into the underground corridors, his movements slower now. The stim reserves were gone. The fever clawed at the edges of his vision. He could hear the creak of his bones, the slush of blood in his boots. But he pushed forward, deeper into the tunnels he had once used for recon deployment. He needed to vanish. To become untraceable. Not because he feared death. But because one shot wasn't enough. This wasn't about Alvex. It was about the message. That even at the edge of defeat, even bleeding in the shadows of a forgotten world, a human with a rifle could still change the course of an empire. The Empire answered Kael's bullet with fire. Within hours of Alvex's death, the sky above Sigma 9 boiled with drop pods and thermal drones. Kael watched from the blackened shell of a drainage conduit as shock troopers deployed with mechanical precision, combing the ruins with pulse scanners and magnetic resonance arrays. They tore through the rubble like surgeons dissecting a corpse, but their quarry was already gone. Kael had vanished into the planet's veins, forgotten tunnels, collapsed mining shafts, and ancient Terran outposts now buried beneath decades of war. His body betrayed him more each hour. The infection in his leg had spread, the wound burned with every step. Still, he moved. He fed on muscle memory and a need that refused to die. He'd lost the advantage of distance, of concealment. They would tighten the noose. But he didn't need days. He needed hours. He tapped into a broken relay node deep beneath the base. The terminal sparked to life, flickering blue against the darkness. His fingers danced across the keys, bypassing what security remained. He accessed the grid map, found the location he needed, the auxiliary reactor core under the Imperial Command Dome. He remembered the layout, he'd memorized it during his first recon drop. Back then, the plan had been extraction. Now, it was obliteration. Kael set off before sunrise, limping through the lower ducts, ducking beneath leaking steam valves and fallen braces. His world narrowed to the next step, the next corner. He ignored the fever, the way his hands trembled when he tightened the makeshift explosives to his chest rig. He carried no food, no water. Only his rifle and 5 pounds of charge. A motion sensor chirped ahead. He froze, heart clenched. Then footsteps, boots, careful and slow. Voices, 2 of them. Imperial accents. Close. Kael pressed his back to the metal wall, steadying his breath. He waited until the second voice drifted past the junction, then struck. A quick strike to the throat, a twist of the wrist, the sickening crunch of silence. The second soldier turned too late. Kael's knife found the gap beneath the chin plate. 2 lives ended in 3 heartbeats. He didn't drag them away. Let the Empire know he was here. Let them chase him. By the time he reached the reactor passage, sirens echoed down the shaft. Lights strobed red across the corridor. Kael didn't run. He planted the charges along the coolant main, securing them with adhesive compounds and carbon thread wire. The overload would destabilize the core's containment field. No dramatic explosion. Just implosion, heat and vacuum swallowing the command structure in a breath. As he set the last wire, something within him slowed. He sat back, resting his rifle across his knees. For a long moment, he let himself breathe. He thought of Earth, of the rain on his family's roof, the sound of his sister's laughter, the day he left without saying goodbye. All of it burned away by orbital fire when the Empire cracked his city like glass. He didn't cry. Kael hadn't cried since Earth fell. But he closed his eyes and whispered names he hadn't said in years. He left the detonator near the coolant trigger and limped back into the shaft, leaving behind the last of his strength. Halfway through the tunnel, he collapsed. His body refused to continue. He didn't fight it. A minute later, the charge went off. The core inhaled itself in a flash of blue-white light. The tunnel shook violently. Metal screamed. Then, silence. 3 days later, the Empire abandoned Sigma-9. No official statement. No explanation. But intercepted chatter among lower ranks spoke of a sniper that moved through walls, whose bullet had killed a general from miles away, whose traps killed teams before they could scream. They whispered about the ghost of Sigma-9, the human they'd left to rot, who had returned as vengeance incarnate. Back on a Terran orbital station, deep within the ice belt of Ferran 3, a rookie sniper reviewed classified footage recovered from Sigma-9's black box. He sat alone in a darkened chamber, watching the final log of Sergeant Kael Voss. The video crackled. Kael's face, pale and bruised, stared into the lens. "I'm not a hero," he said, voice calm. "I'm not a martyr either. I'm what happens when you underestimate a wounded man and leave him behind." Static danced across the frame. "You think you've broken us. But you don't understand humans. We don't stop just because we're beaten. Sometimes that's when we start." The screen faded to black. Below it, etched in steel on the memorial wall, was a single phrase. "One man can still be the war." The silence after Sigma-9's fall was louder than its destruction. On Imperial channels, there was no mention of Alvex's assassination. No footage of the collapsed command dome. The Empire rewrote its loss into a tactical withdrawal. Officially, Sigma-9 was strategically decommissioned. But in whispers, in the frightened mutters of troopers stationed light years away, the truth pulsed beneath every sanitized report. One human sniper had unraveled an entire occupation. Kael Voss became a myth the moment he vanished. Back on Terran stations orbiting the rim, his story spread like fire through frost. There was no body, no formal commendation, just encrypted fragments of his last messages, shared among Black Ops units and rookies eager to believe that one man, alone and bleeding, had broken the Empire's pride. Some doubted he ever existed. Others claimed he had gone dark deliberately, watching from the shadows, waiting to strike again. For Commander Lyra Thorne of Terran Intelligence, Kael's legacy wasn't legend. It was personal. She had recruited him years ago, back when he was still a reckless marksman, newly orphaned, angry at the universe. She had watched him sharpen into something terrifying. Kael never fought for medals or ranks. He fought because he had no peace. He was a weapon that refused to rust. And now, even in his absence, he still cut through enemy morale like a blade. Lyra stood before the Central War table aboard the Resolute, a Terran fleet carrier stationed at the edge of the Narix Belt. Dozens of analysts, captains, and field agents crowded the room. The holodisplay flickered with red zones and intercepted intel, but all eyes were on a single point, a quiet distress beacon pulsing near the ruined Sigma system. It shouldn't have been active. The signal matched an old Terran encryption, one used only by advanced recon units. One used by Kael. "Is it real?" someone asked. Lyra didn't blink. "It's his." "Could be a trap," another officer offered. "Empire bait. Or a dead man's ping set to trigger posthumously." Lyra shook her head. Kael didn't do random. The room waited for her order. But Lyra didn't rush. Her gaze lingered on the flickering light, the frequency of the pulse. It was too clean to be residual noise. Too human in rhythm. Like breathing. Like patience. Kael wasn't a man who died quietly. If he'd wanted to go down with the Sigma reactor, he would've. But if he'd made it out, if he'd dragged himself into some dark place to recover, this signal was his way of whispering back. She leaned over the table, voice calm but decisive. "Prepare, Ghost Team. No chatter. No fleet movements. We go silent." A murmur rippled through the chamber. "You think he's alive?" someone asked. "I think," she said, "he's not done." Hours later, aboard a black stealth frigate sliding between sensor shadows, Ghost Team launched from the lower bay. 6 operatives, handpicked by Kael himself during his last command cycle, dropped into vacuum without fanfare. No lights. No signatures. Only coordinates, an encrypted phrase, and a promise. They would find him or die trying. Beneath Sigma 9's northern pole, buried in the ice crust of a tectonic shelf, a hidden chamber remained untouched by scans. Inside, the remnants of Kael's body lay suspended in a makeshift cryopod, cobbled together from scavenged coolant lines and drone batteries. His breathing was shallow. His heartbeat faint. But it continued. The beacon had activated just as he'd designed, delayed by internal timers, shielded until the orbital interference cleared. It was a final gamble, not for survival, but for purpose. If they found him, it meant the war needed him. If not, he would sleep until the ice reclaimed him. But Kael wasn't dreaming of death. His mind replayed the shot on Alvex, the collapse of the command dome, the breathless silence as he limped into the tunnels, the cold. He remembered the detonator slipping from his hand, the final surge of will before everything blurred. Then, light. A sound. Pressure on his chest. In the blackness, something stirred. His name. Voices. Human voices. Familiar. He wasn't a ghost yet. And as his eyes flickered open, and a gloved hand reached down to steady him, Kael Voss realized he had become something more dangerous than a legend. He had become hope.